Hello, I am Monica the Creative Beast, and I am here for Q&A. I am conducting my creative online gathering, also known as a COG, and I've had some great questions from some of my regulars and a few from people who are new. But this question is coming from Pam of Dog-Eared Journals on Instagram, and her question is, do you ever, or have in the past, made paper? And if so, what methods? As in handmade, painted, marbled, eco-dyed. So that's a great question. And for a moment I was like, oh, do I make paper? And when you mentioned the different ways of making paper, then I had to say, yes, I have made paper. I have not made paper, handmade paper from scratch with all the pulp. I'd love to try it one day, but it does feel really time intensive. So that's a little intimidating, but I would like to try it because it does seem kind of fun. And there are some other ways of making paper. So I have, and I realized, oh, I have a book that I can share of papers that I have made in the past. So when I attended the Artful Journey retreat in Santa Cruz, one year I went and learned some paper making from an amazing book artist named Albie Smith. She was teaching, and she was teaching some ways of making paper with paste paint on paper. And I think she had a jelly print, and I might have tried some jelly printing that day, but jelly printing has not been as appealing to me, but the paste paper was. So you make this paste paint and you can add colorants to it, and it's really cool and a lot of fun. And she suggested, because she loved the way I was making my papers and I was doing stuff on both sides, so I'd do something on one side, let it dry, and I'd go back and do something else on the other side. And I would sometimes put some paint on one page and lay it over another, so there would be an imprint, and one of them would be a little lighter than the next, so there'd be some variations. And she suggested I make a book of specimens, which is what I called this book. And when we had the show and tell at the end of the retreat, this was a book that was on display. So it was also a fun way of learning a different form of binding. So it's accordion, but what you do is you stitch on the mountain edge instead of in the valley like we usually do with bookbinding. And inside, so I'm actually stitching on both the mountain and the valley. So you can see this is stitched in the valley here, and these are stitched on the outer edges. So I made some small pages and some large pages. So essentially we start here, and I'll see if I can go through, but so you can see how they look a little different from the outside and the inside. And then in between that, I added some more paper. And then here's some other paper with some nice shiny, surfacey things. More surfacey stuff, shiny, shiny. So yeah, you can kind of see how things wound up being a little doubled when I started doing imprints. That's a pretty big book. This is some of my favorite stuff. So I would take I'd take some portions of the larger sheets. So I still have pieces of these that I haven't even used yet. I do treasure them. I know I have to make them into books at some point. Put them in a junk journal of some sort. She just loved all these colors I was playing with and color combinations, because I do love to play with color. Some of you have been following me on Instagram for any length of time. You see. Cherry red. Yummy, 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 yum, yum. Cherry red. Let's see if we can. Oh yeah, okay, so that's blue on the other side. And then, you know, with Albie's help, I figured out a way of, you know, running through the pages so it kind of felt harmonious in some way, so that it wasn't just throwing all the papers together. So, you know, we had this, which kind of went into this, which goes into that, which goes into this, and then the blue ties into that. And so, because otherwise, I mean, these are some pretty wild, outrageous papers, and they don't necessarily exactly go together, but I could understand what she meant, that if we were going to make a book as a sample of all these, there had to be a way of making it kind of harmonious as you go through all the pages to see what they look like. So it's my specimens book. So I have a lot of these papers, and there's still a few other papers that I made in that workshop. So that's the primary way I've made paper. Usually I will color it or dye it in some way, like tea dyed paper. And I do have a sample that I have folded into a single sheet book where each section was painted with a different brand or flavor of tea, because I had played with Passion Fruit by Tazo, and it's this beautiful purple color, but when it dries, it turned out to be like this really sad gray color. So it's really interesting how the color will change once it's dried. So I made like a sampling of all these different teas, and like there's an Irish brand called Lyons Gold, and it makes this really wonderful warm goldish tea brown. So it's not really sepia tea, it's more gold, and it's very, very pretty. Um, there's some others. My boyfriend just recently found a tea, and it's a berry, and it's pink when it's wet, and we waited for it to dry and it still stayed pink. So I'm like, hold on to those tea bags, I want them. I have used food coloring in watercolor art journal, and the color doesn't bleed through to the other side, and when you add some wet it doesn't bleed around either, so you could try some food coloring. I have used actual fabric dye to make a little batch of colored water that I will paint onto the paper or dip a little bit of the paper into it. So I've used actual fabric dye as well for making papers. So yeah, so that's the way I have made paper for a lot of my books. So thank you for that question, Pam. I hope that answers your question. And thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this this little Q&A. And I'll be back with another Q&A and another question sometime soon. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time.